Hello and welcome to Exploring Multi-Hub Hybrid Events with Sina Bünte. That is the title of this episode of the Event Manager podcast. Join myself, Miguel Neves, the editor-in-chief of EventMB, and our deputy editor, Dylan Monorchio, as we speak to Sina about fascinating range of topics around the ICCA Congress 2020, a multi-hub hybrid meeting that featured 8 hubs all around the world. We talk a little bit about the strategic decision of actually creating this event and the quick turnaround time that it had. We talked about bringing the experience from past hybrid events from the ICCA world and also from PCMA and taking learnings from those and applying them to this unique format. We talked about the complexity of coordinating an event like this and the need for close collaboration with local partners and stakeholders all over the world. We talked about the feasibility of this type of events for associations and corporates and the costs involved. And we talked about the advantages of creating digital content in this and any other format. I hope you enjoy this episode of the podcast. Make sure you subscribe if you're not already subscribed and leave us a review and a rating. We'd love to hear from you and tell your friends about the Event Manager podcast. So on to this week's edition of the Event Manager podcast.
Now for a word from our sponsors, PHL Life Sciences, a division of the Philadelphia Convention and Visitors Bureau. Host your convention or trade show in Philadelphia, one of America's leading life sciences hubs. PHL Life Sciences, the first and only CVB division of its kind, will connect you to the professionals at the forefront of your industry and to a culture you can only find in Philadelphia. A city known for its rich history that's forging a bright future, Philadelphia challenges the expected and defies convention. A world of discovery is waiting. Visit phllife.com to learn more.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Event Manager podcast. My name is Miguel Neves. I'm the editor-in-chief of EventMB. I'm joined by Dylan Monorchio, the deputy editor, and our special guest today is Sina Bünte, CMPDS, and we're going to be talking about exploring multi-hybrid events with Sina. Sina, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hello, guys. Yeah, I'm good. Good. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. You are, one of the few people that I know that's really been exploring hybrid events in your roles and have really been looking out at this kind of interesting part of the world. And depending on where you're listening or when you're listening to this podcast, maybe hybrid events are normal. Maybe they're something that never happened. Maybe there's something in your future. So hopefully you can get something out of this episode and kind of understand the experience. So I'll just jump into the first question. I mean, we're talking about multi-hub hybrid or hybrid, I guess, as a bigger term. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience so far with hybrid and maybe explain, your relationship, I guess, with hybrid events?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I first, I think got to know about hybrid events like attending the PCMA Community Leaders event, or I don't know when was the first one, 2014, 15, like when they started implementing the online component. And for me, that was really, really good to attend virtually because I wasn't able to go to the US or I wasn't allowed to. So at least I could join then virtually, which was really, really good to get the education and network a little bit with an international audience. And then last year, I was working for ICCA, the International Congress and Convention Association. And like everybody in the industry, we had to transform our events to online and then ultimately also to hybrid. So the first events that we had like in May and in summer, we did fully online. These were smaller events. But then in November, our big ICCA Congress was coming up and we decided to do it in a hybrid multi-hub format, which was a crazy project which we pulled off in a couple of months. So we only started with the preparations in July, in summer. So
okay, so you had about 5 months, 4 months, something like that.
Yeah.
Let me
like,
backtrack a little bit. So this PCMA event you attended, for those who are not familiar with convening leaders, was it like 4,000 or 5,000 people attend in person, something like that, the big PCMA event, and you participated a few times in the hybrid version. What type of hybrid is the PCMA event? Is it when you're participating online, are you have a stream, you participate? Are you connected with the people who are on site, or is it a sort of like separate but live experience? How would you describe that one?
Yeah, I mean, good point. I mean, now probably they might also change a bit of their model, but back then, like 2015, 16, 17, whatever it was when it started, it was mostly that we had a stream. So we were watching a couple of sessions, selected sessions that they were streaming live to the internet, but they also had moderators specifically for the online audience, which I really, really enjoyed. So, and what they did always, they placed like a studio in the convention center in a very busy area. So you had the two moderators or one moderator interviewing people there while people having lunch or having a coffee break, etc. So we as online audience, we could feel the buzz that was in wherever it was, Vancouver and Boston, and see the thousands of people that were there. So I really had this feeling of the FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. I really would have loved to be there. And this is what you should create with hybrid events as well.
Sure.
So in that,
and you were watching the main sessions, right? So it wasn't all the sessions, right?
No, it wasn't.
Had like the keynotes.
It wasn't all of them, but I also think a couple of breakouts. So they had really a lot of sessions that they broadcasted live. And we were able to ask questions, and then there was a chat moderator specifically for us online audience, and then they were brought to the moderator, to the speaker.
So there was a link, not necessarily a continuous link with the two audiences, but there was a link in terms of you asking questions also from the online side.
Yeah. So for the educational point of view, we were able to participate. We could ask questions. But we couldn't really talk to people on site. Let's put it that way. And their focus was really education, provide education for the wider industry, which worked really well. And then, of course, we had the networking among us in the chat, I remember, and the other online participants. But just not so much with the in-person delegates.
Yeah, well, that's, I think it's important just to identify these things and understand how these events work and the design of them. So let's talk a little bit about your event. At the ICCA Congress 2020, you said you had 4 or 5 months to prepare, a little bit of a last-minute pandemic-driven decision. How is that different to this experience? Because this experience that PCMA created is already quite impressive. I think they've been doing it for a long time, which is really interesting. It's not a pandemic kind of experience that the pandemic kind of drove. But what did you try to do that was different, and why did you go in that different direction?
Yeah, I think for us, so the thing is with ICCA is our audience is really, really global. So ICCA has members around the world. So, and that's because we wanted to bring together most of the people possible. So, and in person. Because the ICCA members most of them are CVB, the convention bureaus and venues. So everybody who's involved in person, face-to-face meetings. So obviously we wanted to set an example for the entire industry and everybody who's organizing events, that in-person events are possible under certain circumstances, even during a pandemic. So that's what we wanted to showcase. And we worked together with the destinations and the venues and created 8 hubs then around the world, and depending where our members are and where it was possible. Because back in November, we know, in the Americas, so in North and South America, it wasn't possible. So we said for them, we focus on a fully virtual experience, but for other areas of the world, it was possible to meet. So, I mean, we were supposed to go to Taiwan in Kaohsiung, and there they said we were COVID-free. So in November, we were able to have 200 people there, and it wasn't an issue for them to meet with large groups and have this big event. And then we had smaller hubs around the world. So another one in Asia, or 2 other ones in Asia, in the Middle East, in Europe, in South Africa. And and we did that because we wanted to really set an example, and also showcase obviously the destinations which are the ICCA members, that it is possible to meet. What do you have to do as requirements? What are your learnings? Experiment. I mean, it was a big experiment for all of us involved, I think. But that's sometimes what you have to do if you want to innovate, if you want to change things, you have to experiment.
Well, can you break that down a little bit further? So, there's a headquarter in Taiwan, right? Or there's one of the hubs, so to speak, and there's a stage. There's 200 people there, and then you have stages and small audiences, 50 people, something like that, in 7 other locations around the world. Right. Mm-hmm. So where are the speakers? Like, where's the content coming from?
Yeah. So, I mean, the main hub was, so to say, in Taiwan, but also in the UK in our studio. So we had the technical.
And that's where you were.
I was in Amsterdam. I couldn't travel anywhere. That was one of the challenges for us organizers. But so the technical production team was in the UK, and it was there because the ICCA president was from the UK, and it was very important for us that he was able to go to the broadcast studio, to be there, and that we don't have to record like him from home, etc. But he can be in a TV type studio. So so that was basically the hub for all the technical connectivity, and from there we connected then to the hubs around the world, where we had stages, what you said, and a program. So some sessions were very, very few were pre-recorded, but some are live, but with remote speakers, for example, from the US or from some other places, and then from Taiwan, and then the hubs. So, I mean, what we did is that we started the event with a 4-hour broadcast from, we said Taiwan, but we either welcomed from the studio in the UK, or from Taiwan, and then we had remote speakers or speakers live from the stage in Taiwan. And then after these 4 hours, the local programs basically started in all the different hubs, but they were also broadcasted. So if I was an online attendee and I couldn't travel anywhere, or I didn't want to, then I could choose between like 8 streams, sometimes parallel. Okay, which one do I want to look at? Which one did I want to follow? So that's basically how we did it. So
let me get this straight. For the online audience, you had essentially 8 streams that were happening from different parts. Well, sometimes you only had one, right? If there was a keynote or something like that. But at some point, you had 8 different pieces of content going on that you could tap into, and you could participate online. Okay. If I'm in person at a hub, how is that different? Then do I have, I guess if I'm not in one of the main hubs, I have on the screen a pre-recorded or a stream of something happening somewhere else, right? So I have a sort of feed into that hub. And then I have content sessions that are also then being transmitted, right? But there's also kind of in-person activities, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, correct. So in the mornings when we had this 4-hour broadcast, and everybody around the world saw it basically on a screen, except if you were in Taiwan and the speaker was there live on stage. And then after these 4 hours, the local participants in the hubs, they could either, they had the opportunity to watch it also on their phone or on the computer, any other stream, but they were somewhere in a venue, so they watched what was going on their stage. And later on they could catch up on the other streams if they want, but of course if you're somewhere, you watch what is happening there. We had a couple of sessions that were really interactive because, I mean, obviously, right, if you go somewhere, you have to provide the value as well to the people. You have to provide like workshops or some sessions where we went to different venues or hospitals or outside the venue basically. So and those sessions we obviously didn't broadcast because that didn't really work. They didn't really add much value to the online audience.
So like the experiential kind of things were more just for the local audience. So it sounds to me like you really organized 8 events simultaneously.
Yes. Yeah,
it's just that some of the content was shared amongst those 8 events. Is that pretty accurate description of what? What
Yeah,
happened?
it did. Yeah, and it for us organizers, it felt the same, that we basically organized 8 events at the same time. And but yeah, I mean, that's I think that was about right what we could do back in November 2020, to enable most of our members to meet in person locally. So yeah, I think overall they had this one experience. I'm attending the ICCA Congress, no matter where I was in the world. But also what we did, and maybe that's also good to highlight, is, I mean, we started the program basically 6 weeks earlier, because what we have to keep in mind now with this hybrid component, right? Like before the event and after the event, everybody is virtual. So all your participants, all your members, all your community people, they are virtual. So that's what we started doing. We started the Congress in September with the entire ICCA membership. And everybody was able to join a 3-hour broadcast, educational sessions on the platform. So we introduced the platform to the entire ICCA membership, showing them what will await them until the next for the next 6 weeks. And then after that, end of September, October, we then closed it for only registered people. We had webinars, educational sessions, and networking opportunities until then the actual event in November. So that also emphasized the one event experience for everybody, because they all started already in September or October when they registered. And then in November, they split up into, I remain online or I can go somewhere in person.
Okay. And is this is not what you would normally have done for the ICCA Congress, right?
Correct. No, usually in the past, ICCA Congress was a three-day event somewhere happening in the world.
So you maybe have some sort of promotional activities and things happening before, but the link, this sort of build up and different kind of things happening before, that was pretty
correct.
Pretty
and there
unique
was also, yes, definitely. There was also never a digital component really associated to the ICCA Congress. So we never streamed any sessions or recorded them, provided them afterwards on demand. So that was really the first time. Yeah.
And in terms of this sort of flexibility that you had, I mean, I would assume that was quite hard to achieve, but this idea that some destinations are able to have an in-person event and then maybe the next day they're not able to, and you can kind of switch them in and out of the program, or have the program be delivered in different ways depending on what the condition is. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I mean, we put an article together recently, I think Dylan worked on it as well, which was about Australia and New Zealand, how they're largely COVID free, but actually what happens is a lot of times there's updates and suddenly events can't go ahead, so they have to sort of cancel or restructure things really quickly. I mean, this seems like a structure that enables you to do that, but I'm sure that there's complications, so that's not easy to do, right?
Yeah,
I would assume that sorry. It's like you're planning 8 different events in 8 different destinations, subject to 8 different governments' regulations, right?
Yep. No, that's correct. And we really had to be very flexible and adapt and be ready to change whatever can happen. And it did happen. So, and that's exactly what you said, Dylan, of like 8 different governmental regulations. I mean, for that, obviously, we work together very, very closely with the CVBs and the governments. But that what happened on the Thursday, I think before the Sunday of the live event, so that in Luxembourg, all of a sudden we were not allowed to gather there with a lot of people. So then only the speakers were allowed to go to Luxembourg, and everybody else, all the participants, had to either change to go to Malaga in Spain or to the online participation. So
that's a bit of a shift, right? I have my flight booked and my hotel booked in Luxembourg. It's like, well, you could go to Malaga, which is, I don't know, 2,000 kilometers away or something like that.
Yes. So I think that's what we have to also learn and adapt to. Like this is that's how it was last year, but this will be still for quite some time. I think this being flexible, being like you have to adapt quickly to things and having a lot of plan Bs and Cs, etc. But yeah, so for Luxembourg, we were still able to have the speakers there on stage. And when they didn't have the session, they could be the audience. But obviously, I know I felt really, really bad for the participants that booked their flight and hotel, etc., and I couldn't go. But it was a governmental regulation, and obviously it wasn't our preferred choice either. And for another hub in Sarawak in Borneo, we also had to change plans quite quickly because nobody was allowed to go there anymore. So then it was a fully online hub. That's what's happening if you have 8 hubs around the world during a pandemic. But yeah.
I assume that there's quite an incentive for the destination to make it happen, though. I mean, can you speak a little bit about the importance of your partnerships with government bodies and the support that you receive from them?
Definitely. I mean, definitely. I mean, and those are the ICCA members, right? So they, I mean, we worked together with them. We said, okay, we want to organize the ICCA Congress in a hybrid format with hubs. Who wants to host a hub, let's say? And then there was interest, and the destinations came forward and made it possible. So obviously, this partnership was really, really important. And for them, obviously, it was a good way to showcase their destinations, their venues, to say like, okay, we're able to do that. These are the safety regulations that we have in place, etc. You can come, and we want to be part of that global event. So yeah, definitely, I think partnerships are so important with all kind of events and for the association industry. So obviously, that played an important role.
Yeah, but I mean, did you receive any special treatment from any government specifically, or municipal or broader?
I wouldn't say special treatment in that respect. I mean, obviously, they had to treat our delegates and our participants like everybody else, like, I mean, in the form of, we cannot give you special treatment that you don't have to quarantine if necessary. I mean, that wasn't necessary, but such examples, or you don't have to do the tests, etc. So in that respect, no, obviously we didn't. We had the special, like, not special, but we had the venues put together, like the safety requirements, and sometimes we had the COVID testing in some venues, or the temperature checks, etc. But they would have done that, or this is necessary for all kind of events. So that was not specially for us. And
I meant less like a buddy nepotistic special treatment system, and more towards the like impetus to create special policies around business events. Like, for example, the German government made earlier in the pandemic an explicit distinction between mass gatherings, which were forbidden, and planned events, which were permitted, on the premise that all of these special considerations could be put in place to mitigate the risk within them. So I was wondering if any developments there happened as a result, or concordantly with what you were doing.
I mean, probably for them, it was also a good learning to see what is possible, and what things you have to put in place. But then it was December, so we know how things changed again in December with the third wave, or whatever wave it was then.
All the new variants popping up.
Yes, the variants, etc. So I mean, I think it was a good test as well for them, and experience of what we have to do, what we have to provide, how we can support the events industry to bring events back. But then if the third wave is coming, etc., then it doesn't matter what you did in November and how well you did it if events are not possible anymore. But luckily, we see things opening up again.
Are you ready to celebrate your successes in the world of meetings and events? The Skift Meetings Awards are back for 2024, recognizing the most innovative business events companies across 15 categories, and we want you to be a part of it. Winners will feature on Skift Meetings, sending a clear signal to events professionals around the world that these are partners they can rely on. The final deadline for submissions is June 11th. We encourage you to start your submission today to secure the best entry rates. For more information and to start your submission, head to live.skift.com.
So Sina, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the learnings from here. because we've talked about the ICCA Congress. It was a pretty special time, a pretty special situation. We talked a little bit about how flexible, you have to be. But, what did you learn from that in terms of like how that may be able, to help people organizing hybrid events? Because we're recording this in June of 2021, where a lot of the industry is thinking that events are all going to be hybrid, or a lot of events are going to be hybrid. For anybody considering this idea of like a multi-hub hybrid, what's your kind of main advice, and particularly, I guess, starting with this flexible side of things, which I think could still be very relevant if certain regions of the world close down or whatever. I don't know, start wherever you want to start, because I'm sure that there's a lot of learnings there.
Yes, definitely. But I mean, first of all, yes, so you have to be very flexible and you have to be able to adapt to changes. You also have to be flexible, not in terms of, okay, we have to do it now fully online, but also you have to be ready to maybe reimburse registration fees, and what about hotel room contracts and all of these kind of things. So again, there is a partnership really, really important, that also the suppliers, so like hotels, venues, etc., they have to change their flexibility in that respect as well, which I think is very important and key moving forward. Then from my point of view as a planner, I mean, obviously, then, we talked about flexibility, but then you have to have all these contingency plans. You have to have multiple plans for everything that could go wrong, because you now have this technical component involved. So, I mean, we had a lot of plans of like, what if the stream doesn't work, or what if the remote speaker doesn't show up, what if the internet is down, etc. So it's very, very important that you have all these plans and you are prepared for whatever scenario might happen. And then also, I think it's important that you trust the partners. I mean, we talked about that. I was in Amsterdam. I was at the ICCA head office. I couldn't travel anywhere. I couldn't even do site inspections, which we usually would have done. But I really had to rely on the partners everywhere around the world and the production company in the UK, and trust them. So, but again, there it comes back to very good communication. So also with them, I mean, I was constantly connected to them via a Teams call. So if there is something happening with the stream or something in the studio, then I would know immediately, and I can, plan accordingly, or I can react. I can act accordingly.
Just out of interest and for my curiosity, how many different streams or chats were you in at any one time?
Oh my God. Well,
because I'm sure you had a speaker chat, you had the technical team chat, you had the feed, the Teams meeting that was always going.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously with all my colleagues around the world, or the PCOs, if my colleagues also couldn't go to any of the hubs. So these were alone 8, and then groups with a production company, and then with a speaker. So I don't know. I think my WhatsApp was full of these groups. But this is so important. And I mean, I had very good team members, and like Josephine was in charge of the education. So she was mostly communicating with the speakers. So if there was any issue with them, then I didn't have to be involved, let's say. But a lot of groups, but this is the nice part about that we can communicate very, very flexible and easy now with like WhatsApp and Teams and Slack groups and stuff. So, yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So, I mean, complex, definitely some good advice there, but how does it make you feel about hybrid meetings and multi-hub hybrid, particularly, this kind of quite challenging? Do you feel good about it? Do you feel like it's what people should be looking at, or how do you feel about it in general?
Yeah, I mean, it's not something new, right? I mean, big corporations have done it for years, and big associations like European Society of Cardiology or Radiology, they had this digital component for many years, and we mentioned PCMA as well. So, but I think
but those are quite different, right? Those are more like the streams with the online focus, right?
Yes, yeah. I mean, like for the ESC and ACR, I'm not sure how much they really engaged with the online audience. but just saying that they always had this digital component at least. So they at least, had cameras there and et cetera, et cetera. So for them now, when we talk about hybrid events and we talk about the connection of the two audiences, it's not so much of it, like it's not so much work, let's say, and that's not a big challenge. But for the other associations and for the other organizations that saw the digital transformation but kind of ignored it, for them it was a very, very big impact last year. And it was like, okay, we have to do that now. So, and I think because of the pandemic, we speed up this whole process. Usually it would have taken probably a couple of more years, but now we had to do it last year and this year. So in this respect, it was, we had to really learn very, very quickly how to do that. And I think in the future, like we won't call it a hybrid event, but we will just simply say it's an event. And with some organizations, they will have the digital component add to it and some not. So I think this is basically what we will see and what we also saw this year. And I mean,
but do you think that what are the special set of circumstances that will take people to create a multi-hub experience? Because I see a lot of, events that, are just virtual for now or start to have some sort of in-person component. Sometimes it's a small audience at the studio or something like that, or sometimes there's a speaker coming from somewhere else. But to actually have groups of people physically watching and engaging with each other in multiple places in the world, where do you see that being a good fit?
I mean, it depends, or it's a good fit for those associations that want to gather their local communities. If you have chapters around the world, if you have a very, very global audience, then this is a very good way of gathering at least them locally, because they might not be able to travel far away internationally or are not allowed, or things are changing. The whole travel, how we travel and how much we travel is changing. So then if you have the hubs, if you gather your communities locally, you at least give them the chance to meet face to face, which we all know is super, super valuable. And they were used to before 2019. So in that respect, if you can create these local communities, this is really valuable. But, probably it depends again on the type of associations, how big they are and how much resources they have, because I experience it myself that it's a lot of work, and you need also, it's a question about cost as well, and budget and resources, how many staff members you have, etc. So definitely not all of associations are able to do that.
I wonder if
go ahead.
I wonder how the delivery of content online is going to impact that as well, because we're working on a post now that will have been published by the time this podcast airs, that deals with virtual content's capacity to blow past borders and language barriers in order to promote inclusive access for attendees and speakers, really. And I wonder if the hub and spoke model could be the on-site answer to that challenge, in the sense that it gives access locally to lots of content that someone might not otherwise have access to if it were siloed and in one global annual conference or something. And potentially I imagine that it would also give access to local chapters to open and avail of some of the experience and expertise of the larger whole. Yeah,
and this is a very, very good point. I mean, the whole discussion that we have now and the benefits of making events more inclusive and more accessible, language barriers might disappear or are minimized. So yeah, I mean, if you can organize local hub events, you can have it in their local language. For example, you don't have to stick to like the global language. Maybe it's English, for example, but you can have the education in their local language, and then if you stream it online, you can offer translation. So I mean, this is the whole benefit of hybrid events, that you can really expand your reach, and you can reach so many more people with this digital component, or if you do like local hub meetings, which in the past were not possible, for people to attend for whatever reason. So I think this is a really, really, really important topic that we should really keep in mind and focus on moving forward.
I want to dig in a little bit deeper on a couple of points there. One is, with your ICCA Congress experience, you had speakers coming live from each of the locations, right? So you had an audience, you had speakers, or some of the locations. How important do you think that is? Because if they were sort of watch parties that were spread around the world, you could still do the networking. You could still have that sense of local community. But in terms of production, it would be way easier to just have a big screen or a projection or a cinema kind of setup where you're just watching some content and then you have a networking session. How important is it to have speakers coming locally? Is that important to kind of motivate the local community to be part of it? Or do you think it would work just as well if there weren't any speakers?
I mean, it depends. It depends on the audience. It depends on the participants. For some, probably it wouldn't matter, and also sometimes, depending on how big the room is, or if you're in a huge ballroom somewhere, you would probably see it on screen anyways, with a camera, because you sit so far away, you don't even really see the speaker. But for some other audiences, it might matter. Sometimes they're like, oh, I was in a room with this and the speaker, or I have the opportunity to speak with that person, face to face after the session or before the session, if possible. So, I mean, it depends. It really depends. Like, I would say, ask your participants, ask the audience, how do they feel about it? Would they mind if some speakers are not there or not? I mean, because if, for example, you would have the opportunity to get this amazing speaker from wherever, and he would never be able to come to your event in person, but he can now deliver his talk virtually, I think you should go for it, because you can get this education and you can get this content exchange with him, even if he's on screen. And on the other hand, it would be like, okay, no, we wouldn't be able to get him there, and he wouldn't be part of the program. So what do you prefer? So ask your members, ask the audience. I mean, sometimes it depends, sometimes people really want to be close to that person. They want to shake hands maybe with that person. But sometimes it's more important to get that education and to have the possibility to speak with this person. Even
I guess also explaining like who's going to be live and who's going to be on a video feed, that could get quite complex, right? Because if you have lots of different kind of possibilities, I don't know, in terms of attracting the audience, that could be interesting. But let's talk a little bit about cost, because that's, I think, something that the whole industry is concerned about. A lot of people are being tasked to kind of exploring hybrid events, and just how much more expensive is it in your experience? And do you think that it's feasible for, who do you think it's feasible for? I guess is probably a good way to ask.
Yeah. I mean, when I talk to associations, and I'm mostly involved in the association industry, so I'm not talking so much about the big corporations, because that's a whole different story. But then I don't think it's feasible for a lot of the smaller societies and associations, because simply it is a cost factor that you have to add. And probably those associations, they also never streamed their content, never recorded them, never had these additional AV equipment in the rooms. So for them, now adding that is, of course, like a big cost factor. And I don't think this is possible in now, right? Maybe in the future, yes, because costs will probably also go down now that it's getting more normal to have this technical component. But otherwise, like in the near future, it's probably like more the bigger associations that can set it off with like sponsorship, for example, or getting more attendees, getting more revenue in that sense.
So I think what you're saying is it's more incremental, right? If you had at least part of the equipment already ready, if you were sort of set up in that direction, it's not a huge difference. But is an element of that also that associations or any organization needs to understand how to use the content?
Yeah.
Right? Because one thing is to create all this situation and make it all happen. But then if you're not really able to either monetize it or use it as a real tangible benefit to your audience, then it sounds to me like a bit of a missed opportunity.
Yes, correct. I mean, definitely we need to have this, this shift in mindset, maybe like thinking, okay, the event doesn't end on that day, but we can extend the event, the education, so we can use the content that we recorded, that we gathered during the event, and use it throughout the year. Use it post event as well, and monetize it. Maybe you can sell that, for example. You can offer it to your members after the event. So definitely that is the shift that we have to realize and to make, that the event is not only these 3 days, but extend it and use the content that you created. Yeah.
And I mean, do you see hybrid as the future of the industry? I think that's a big question. And if you had to kind of think about a percentage, let's say associations, in terms of the association events that are happening, what percentage do you think associations will be doing hybrid events, this year or next year?
Well, this year I would say 20%, very, very low. Although everybody said 2021 will be the hybrid event year. But there's so much still going on in the world that it's not sure where we can meet in person, and also how to do it. I think a lot of planners are still not sure about all this technical component and organization. So, and as of next year, I think then, most associations really, really want to go back to in-person. I talk to a lot of associations, and I can really I have this feeling that they all can't wait to next year, when they have the opportunity probably like to go back to in-person, and it's without a lot of risk that they have to change it back to online. And then some will add the digital component, but some also won't. So in terms of a percentage, I would maybe say, God, I don't know. It's very difficult, right? I mean, because there are associations about everything and all kinds of sizes, of big and small, with a lot of budget and with a smaller budget. So, and I mean, also depend, like you can include the online component also in a different way. You don't have to do it during the main event. And I think this is also what we will see, is that maybe the in-person event will be an in-person event without the online component, but you engage online with your audience, with your members throughout the year, maybe, or weeks before and after, and then online. So, I mean, maybe, I don't know, if I have to tell you a number, maybe then I would say like 60%. So maybe more than half would actually do a hybrid event. But I mean, let's see how it is actually, how it's going to be.
I think you raise a really interesting point, that you don't have to do hybrid events to have a hybrid strategy that is orchestrated around a combination of virtual events, for those content-driven programs that are really amenable to virtual, and then in-person components that are more about networking and having that face-to-face time and driving that face-to-face value that's not even really derived so much from the one-to-many content delivery system that you often find in association-related lectures. So that's really interesting. But I'm curious more like about the hub and spoke aspect of it, and that the future of hub and spoke as a strategy and as a mechanism. And I know a lot of global associations already have a de facto hub and spoke kind of, strategy for member engagement, because there are a lot of locally relevant things that they want to deliver. But in terms of cost, as it pertains to hub and spoke, obviously you're in some sense multiplying your event cost by 8, for example, if you're planning 8 different events in 8 different locations with 8 different AV setups, if you're doing that. Is there a cost incentive such that you have more things to sponsor, or more value add to your local members that you could potentially charge a premium for? Or, can you talk a little bit about the ROI for doing that? And how that impacts the budget decision?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously, if you have hubs and these satellite events around the world, your budget is impacted. But then on the other hand, what you said, you have more sponsorship opportunities, you reach a wider audience, you get probably more attendees to attend the event. So you have more revenue in terms of registration costs. And if you include remote speakers, which your audience might be totally fine with, then you save a lot of cost as well in flights and in accommodation. So in that respect, obviously the cost will go up if you have in-person events around the world, but you can offset that with getting more sponsorship money in or fundings or other revenue opportunities.
Okay. And I think to wrap up, what's your advice to people looking at this kind of format, either a more simple hybrid or a more complex multi-hybrid event? Having lived through it, what advice could you give your fellow planner community friends?
I mean, obviously, it's always good to know your audience, right? That's what we always say at the beginning of everything. You have to know your audience and your objectives. So I would say, ask your audience, ask your members, like, how did you like the online component last year and maybe beginning of this year? Do you think we have to have an in-person event again? Yes or no? Like, do you need the online component? And if they say yes, then okay, then go for it, organize a hybrid event and find a way to organize it. But if they say no, like for example, it worked perfectly fine, we don't have to have this event in person anymore, then don't, right? Because things are changing and what we talked about. So don't go back to the mindset that we had before the pandemic, that we have to have everything in person, etc. And then so I would check and also like ask your other stakeholders, right? They're not only the participants, but all stakeholders have to be involved. Like your sponsors, your organizers, the destinations, etc. If they find it valuable to have this event as a hybrid format, then you know the answer. And then obviously what I experienced also, because for us it was like a very, very steep learning curve, and I wish I would have more case studies to read or more, or be able to take a course within a day to learn how to do it. But now, like, and if you have not done it yet, do those courses that are out there. There are so many out there. Like, there's the DES course from PCMA. There are these courses from Event Leadership Institute. I just finished one about AV and technical production, which I found really valuable. So there are a lot of resources out there that you can learn how to do it, but also realize that you are not alone, right? So the events community is very supportive, I think, in that way. Like, there are Slack communities, there are Slack groups. Like I join every week like a technical meetup for event tech chat, so where we talk about these technical aspects and give each other help and advice. So just to realize that there are other people in the same shoes, and a lot maybe when you plan that have done that. So reach out to them and ask for their experience and learnings and tips that they have, or involve experts really in that, a good production team or consultants, etc. Like, realizing you are not alone with that. So get the help if you need it, and collaborate with people. And then I would really say, like, don't be afraid, but experiment. This is how we get innovation. Like, step out of your comfort zone, and experiment a little bit with it and try it.
Yeah. So really, you're not alone. Don't think that you're alone, right? That's an important part of figuring all this out. Great message, Sina. Thank you for that. Sorry, Dylan.
I was just saying, lots of resources.
Yeah, exactly. And come to eventmb.com. We have lots of resources about this as well, of course.
Exactly.
But wanted to ask one question. We're asking all our guests, and hopefully it doesn't put you on the spot too much, but we'd love to have a recommendation from you of someone else that we should invite on the Event Manager podcast.
Oh God, there are so many amazing people out there.
Great.
But And this is good, right? It's positive. That is really positive. But if you want to focus a bit more on this, communities and 365 engagement and stuff, which we shortly touched on, because it is definitely part of another hour of talk. But then you could invite Matthias Fleming for one of your episodes. He's one of my former colleagues from ICCA, and now he works for open social or community engagement platforms. So I'm sure he would be really good to interview, to talk about this, engagement throughout the year and extending your event life cycle.
Thank you very much. We'll definitely connect, and I know Matthias as well, so we could bring him on the show and get his view on this. Sina, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure and always good to talk to you about this topic. I know you have some exciting projects coming up. Is there anywhere that if people want to talk to you, connect with you, is there anywhere that you'd recommend people get in touch with you? Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter. You find me, just look at my name, and my handle is Sina Bünte, so you find that. And you also find my company on Instagram, Twitter, and the website digitalmind.events. So feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to chat and talk to people.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Looking forward to hearing more about it. All the best to you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the Event Manager Podcast. Please subscribe and rate the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. For the latest news and the best articles on technology and innovation in the event industry, head over to eventmb.com.